evening and welcome to Women's Hour. I've stopped saying beautiful ladies. I keep forgetting. But hello, beautiful ladies. Welcome back to Women's Hour. If you get that reference, you're a very special kind of person. I've been doing a very sneaky reference at the start of every Women's Hour episode, but I'll never tell. With me tonight, Amy's pouring herself a lovely cafetiere of coffee. Is that right? You're going to brew that
Yes.
and then... Wonderful. Birdie, you're back from a small hiatus. How's it been going with you?
Good evening. Yeah, I've been slightly busy running around doing this, that, and everything. But yeah, I mean, people who follow me on Twitter have kind of kept up with what I've been doing. So yeah, it's been slightly chaotic, but it's good to be back.
It's nice to do stuff in the summer, isn't it? Rather than just staying inside and trying to hide from the sun. Actually be outside and doing things. It's a lovely time to be outside.
It's definitely been one of those weeks, and the past couple of weekends, meaning Fridays, have, as it's summer season, it's also Steam season, so we've got a lot of rallies, etc., and things we've been going to. So I was quite grateful to actually be staying in a bed this week and not in a field. So
Well, camping's fun, but only for first couple of nights, isn't it? Really.
yeah, absolutely.
And Amy, you're our headliner tonight. You've kindly prepared some information about Mary Whitehouse for us to enjoy and to discuss. Thank you to the super chatter who sent the request for this topic. Thank you very much to that person. And if you would like to have your topic addressed, I'm talking to the audience now, you can submit a super chat, and the highest paying super chat will have their topic answered by the ladies in an upcoming episode of Women's Hour. So please have those coming in, and we will read them out on the show, whether they are topic suggestions or otherwise. But without further ado, thank you very much, Amy, for doing all of the legwork for this, and I'm looking forward to learning all about Mary Whitehouse. And it was your idea to do a poll, so we'll poll people in the audience before and after we do the discussion. Does that sound like a good idea to you? Is that what your idea was?
Yeah, was Mary Whitehouse right?
Was she right? Okay. If you start blethering, if you start giving us the benefit of all your lovely knowledge, then I can start doing that. Would you like me to share the first image or a different image?
I was going to start by I started this from the assumption that both of you, that all of us would think that Mary Whitehouse was right. And I kind of guess then I remembered that Poe, you came from a position of more of a free speech, more libertarian, not actually, but a more libertarian perspective. And then I realized that I had no idea what Birdie's opinion on this was at all, but I just assumed, because despite what the chat thinks, I think that Birdie is quite a temperamentally conservative person, considerably more than me, at least. So I just assumed that you both would think that Mary Whitehouse was right, and but I guess that's not necessarily the case. Do you? I kind of want to know what your opinions on it are.
Birdie, do you want to go first? I'm still trying to figure out this poll.
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen of Mary Whitehouse, I'm on the fence. Some things I agree with, some things I don't. With a lot of things with me, I'm not very. Yeah, I mean, I can be conservative. That's true. I'm not going to say I'm not. But I think it's easy to say that a lot of people do assume with me, and it's quite amusing if I go the other way. So I'm quite interested to see what exactly you've managed to drag up about Mary Whitehouse, and see if my opinion changes come the end of the stream, or during even. So,
okay, the poll's now up. If you're in the chat watching live, you can vote, and we will poll you again at the end of the show. I feel very conflicted about this, so I'm hoping that Amy will. What we learned tonight will help me have a firmer position on this. But I, for one, love gory, sexual, swearing, TV.
Anime.
The anime, I'm very degenerate in my tastes of what the entertainment that I enjoy. So the idea that in a world where we listen to Mary Whitehouse, that we wouldn't have Game of Thrones, like a TV show that I thought was very, very good for the first couple of seasons at least. I'm not saying it was high art, but for a while, Game of Thrones, for me and for lots of other people, was the most like the most richly entertaining and what do you call it, the salacious TV that you could get, and it was I think very well written. I love the books, and I think that rather than just being good art that was enhanced or just with all the trappings of sexuality and gore and and violence, I think those things actually did contribute to the story in a way that was meaningful. Of course, it was gratuitous in places as well, but I think you couldn't really adapt Game of Thrones without that sort of thing. That's just an example. It's not my favorite TV show ever, but I do love swearing in TV when it's used right. I love I don't want to say I love watching people having sex on TV. There's a place for it. I think that it does enhance an artistic product, and same thing for violence and gore. So I really don't want to live in a world without those things. But I do believe that Mary Whitehouse was poorly treated in her lifetime. Her efforts were just universally mocked and derided. And history has not been kind to her. So I'm looking forward to learning more, and maybe repenting all of my sins and saying, I'm sorry, Mary. We'll see what we all think at the end. But is that what you expected, Amy?
I'm surprised that you like as much PG stuff as you do. I must admit, I was not expecting that. I mean, I kind of should have guessed it from the anime.
Yeah.
Poe has a dark side.
What was that, Birdie?
Poe has a dark side.
Yes.
I'm not as trad as I like to come across on Women's Hour. I guess I'm made of light and dark. There's two walls inside of me. Before we get going, we've got an early super chat from Evil Ways for £5. Thank you very much. Please don't do too many streams on people who were relevant half a century ago. So this is someone asking us not to do historical things. Well, we'll do streams on whatever we darn well think is interesting. So
we'll do streams on whatever we're paid to do streams on.
Whatever you pay us to do. That's what we do.
So with Mary Whitehouse, her career spanned like essentially four decades, and she had fingers in many pies. So what I kind of wanted to focus on was the sort of how she came to do what she did, and her relationship with the BBC specifically, because that is not a private organization. That's like a sort of, it's an arm of government essentially, and also in relation to her sort of initial focus point, which was sex and Christianity. So I'm mainly because of the sheer amount of stuff she did, I'm focusing on them. And I think the first image, if you could get it up, Poe, is kind of pre-Mary Whitehouse, like tiny picture. I'm sorry, that's like
we will enhance.
I think that this is some fantastic aesthetics, if I'm going to say so. It certainly reminds me of something. But this is from an organization called Moral Rearmament, which kind of took off in the 1920s in Oxford. It was founded by a man called John Bookman, and it was a mainly Protestant, but like all multi-faith, like revivalist movement. And in the sort of post First World War, lead up to Second World War years, he argued that the most important thing for the world, for the West specifically, was not in military rearmament, but moral rearmament. He said that the crisis with the West, especially with the mid-century Germans and Italians, was fundamentally a moral one, and that the nations must rearm morally. Moral recovery creates not crisis, but confidence and unity in every phase of life. And this was a movement that Mary was involved in from quite early on. She joined in 1935, and it's where she met her husband, and she was quite active in this. And this was not like a fringe movement. 30,000 people attended the launch of Moral Rearmament at the Los Angeles Hollywood Bowl, and John Bookman was praised and decorated by multiple like nations and leaders of nations across the world. It was a worldwide movement, and it was big. And one of the things that they did, which I think is quite relevant, is they put on plays that like emphasized like cooperation, honesty, mutual respect between opposing groups. And there's a picture, the next slide is a picture of them putting on one of those plays. So they kind of did this through entertainment. And like I said, she was quite she was not like she was locally within her area quite prominent. So she had experience with organizations, and in organizing events and organizing movements. And this is something that she actively tried to distance herself from an optics perspective, like when she started Clean Up TV, because it was considered like quite a kooky movement, quite a kooky conservative movement.
Just getting involved with organizations that already exist is a great way to, if you want to start having influence on, I mean, it makes it sound quite sinister, but if you want to become like an important person who has influence, really the best thing you can do, I think, is to just join organizations that already exist and just be there to help. And to, if you're the kind of person who people look to for help, who will just volunteer to organize stuff, just start to organize events and things. It's one of those things that you just incrementally get more and more. People know who you are. They look to you as like a competent person who takes on responsibility. And I think you can, at least on a small scale, you can get quite far doing that.
You can gain organizational skills and learning how to run the mechanics of the bureaucracy of an organization.
Yeah. So continue with the story.
Okay. She also, throughout the 50s, published work, not always under her own name, but she put herself out there in expressing opinions from quite early on, often through like a storytelling perspective. So there's an article she wrote called Another Exodus, a true story of a little boy told by his mother, which was published with her maiden name while she was married. And it was about the process of teaching her son how to, if he'd done something wrong, how to, I guess, confess to his wrongdoings. And she also wrote another article, which was quite big, called A Mother's Approach to Social Problems, which was published in the Sunday Times in 1953. And it was about the role of mothers in bringing their children's natural urges into the right channels, i.e., how not to inadvertently influence your son into being a homosexual, which was, I'm not going to talk about like that aspect of her work in this stream, but that was quite a big article. It was reprinted by the Times as a pamphlet, which included like loads of letters from the audience the readers that had written in, as well as like a rebuttal from, I think, the editor of the Sunday Times wrote a rebuttal to that. So she'd like prior to this, she generated discussion and controversy, and she was a school mistress at Madley Secondary School, and this is like how she came into the public limelight. Is she was asked to teach sex education to her class, and there's a clip of her speaking about how she did that in
Is that the first one? Clip one?
Clip one, yeah.
So suppose you have the ideal assortment.
It's playing on a different screen.
Right mental age. Where would?
All right, I'm going to play it properly through StreamYard so you can all hear the audio properly. 1 second, please.
Put her hold music on.
I'll put the hold music on.
You have the ideal assortment of children of the right mental age. Where would you? What would be the first thing that you put to them about sex education?
Well, I think I'd want to answer your question by going a bit further back, because I don't think the place for sex education to begin is in the school at all.
Where is it?
I think it should begin in the home.
But it doesn't begin in the home.
Well,
otherwise schools wouldn't have taken it over.
Well, no, you're oversimplifying these things. I don't think this is true at all. That even with my husband and myself, and our eldest child is now well on in his 30s. We made up our mind all that time ago that we would answer our children's questions as they were raised.
But Mrs. Whitehouse, the only way to get parents to do that is their own sex education in
Well,
schools.
exactly.
It isn't going to
No,
happen
no,
just by
no.
you wishing it to happen.
No, if I may say, that this is the first thing, that we have to actually raise a generation of children.
I don't want to let it play too long because we might get a copyright strike. I'll go back to it, but if we do like a reaction video, it'll be it'll be more favourable to YouTube.
Yeah, so there's a section in which she discusses the main thing that she learned from doing sex education was that by doing it in school, what you can actually do is separate the child from its parent. And what she wanted to do was to create a world in which, a society in which these things were discussed in a healthy way, in a way that in which parents were passing down knowledge in a healthy way to their children, so that they can live a moral and fulfilling life from the offset. Whereas the woman came at this from the perspective of schools have to do this. And I think that that's quite an interesting point that Mary has made, is that she
She wanted it to stay in the family.
She talked about, when we think of Mary Whitehouse, I think we often think about her sort of taking stabs at things within culture.
Sorry, go on.
But taking like stabs at specific things in culture. Well, actually, what she did was she talked about things on a quite a large civilizational scale, which is it's difficult to laugh at that. I think what the point she makes have been actively hidden, and that's why I included this clip. Was that is why essentially the first sex education program was rolled out. I can't remember where it was. I think it might have been in Hungary, but that was the explicit purpose of sex education in that communist state, was to separate children from parents.
Okay. I think well, the thing about sex education and about sort of childhood innocence in general is that I think we often forget how in a lot of ways social values and sort of prudishness, it reached its kind of peak with the Victorians, I believe. Well, that's the kind of impression. But before that, when especially families who are living in poverty, they didn't really have the luxury of privacy the way that modern people do, having things like bedrooms and having like a door that you could close. So although I would never want to sneer at the idea of childhood innocence, it's quite the opposite. It's a slightly more nuanced thing than I think we think of these days. This idea that children, these days we want to keep them completely sheltered, like literally in a different room to anything sexual that's going on, whereas people who when a whole family's living on top of each other, they've probably from a younger age sort of understood a bit more about what mummy and daddy are doing.
Well, she didn't speak about, when she spoke about sex education, she didn't speak about childhood innocence. She talked about approaching things from the place of moral the moral good, creating joy in life, and from in an age appropriate way. And I think the difference between Mary and this other woman and the general approach we take now is that it is explained by C.S. Lewis in The Abolition of Man, when he talks about how modern education is like the relationship between a battery chicken farmer and his battery chicken, whereas previously it would have been like a baby bird being taught how to fly by its parents. One is one doing one thing to another thing, and the other is a sort of like a initiation into adulthood.
Okay. Shall I play the rest of the clip? Because I do want to hear more of what she has to say, but I wanted to break it up with a bit of talking to appease the YouTube censors.
Who by sex
adults?
education school? It has to begin there. How would it begin
Can
elsewhere?
I just finish what I'm trying to say? We have to educate a generation of children now who will in their turn be able to talk to their own children.
How?
But ideally first, parents to talk to their children. But now then the second thing, and this was something that we discovered from our own experience, that if you're not very careful, you can do a lot of things as sex education in schools, but you can do one or two things which are very important. One is you can divide a child from his parents. You can, by giving them sex education in schools and not involving the parent, you can actually divide those two generations.
In what way?
It's so interesting the way that, in a completely different way to how she's exactly describing, this is exactly what we're seeing now, not specifically with sex education, but with this idea of sexual identities and particularly these days gender identities, where in the school they are encouraged to explore these things and going like, well, what kind of person do you feel like? What kind of person are you attracted to? We will affirm that. We will be encouraging of that. You're safe to be whoever you want to be here. But those horrible people at home, if they say you can't be that, don't listen to them. Those people are abusing you. That's seriously, like, it's weird how right she was on that front in a slightly different way to how it turned out.
Mm-hmm.
If I can chime in on what we've been talking about in general, sex and sex education has always been a bit of a taboo subject. People didn't want to talk about it. So when it first came into schools, it was still very much we're not sure about this subject. A lot of parents weren't sure, a lot of teachers weren't sure. But I think people did come to realize that it was an important subject to touch on, not necessarily to go into depth with, but just make the students aware of what it is. Now, the interviewer, she keeps going on saying, well, the parents don't talk about this. They don't, what the hell did she think they were doing before school? As we were saying earlier, a lot of people, the families were massive. You were quite literally crammed into very small houses. It was still a taboo subject before it came into school, but it was down to normally the mother to make sure, especially their daughters, were educated to a certain degree about relationships, about sexual relationships, etc., etc. But I do believe there has to be a line. Now, in today's schooling, sex education, I think we can all agree, has gone a little bit too far, and they do tend to push it upon children. So instead of just touching on the subject of, this is how it works, age of consent, the important things, they're going on about gender identities and who you might be when you grow up or what gender you might be. These things don't need to be discussed. They need the important things, but why aren't parents talking to their children? It shouldn't be an embarrassing subject within parents. I do think mothers should be able to just talk to their daughters about that subject. Again, you don't have to go into gruesome detail. There is no need for it.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think it's always going to be awkward because it is taboo.
She brought in the mothers and the fathers to the sex education. So obviously male or female were separated, and she involved the parents. When she realized that this was happening, she explains that she involved the parents in it so that they could teach, that they could feel comfortable, they knew what was going on, and so that they could contribute as well and learn how to deal with this in an adult in an adult way,
in an adult manner. I do think it's been basically bred out, in a non-pun way. Parents just don't do it anymore. I mean, no meaningful I don't want to be mean to anybody's parents, but I certainly didn't have the talk with my parents growing up. They did touch on it, saying, use protection, be safe, that talk when you're a young teenager. But when it actually came to sex education, we started learning that in year 6 in primary school, for those who weren't, don't know the school systems in England. So you're sort of 11 years old.
The puberty talk stuff, yeah.
Yeah,
think-
exactly. But even then, we had to have a written consent form from our parents to be able to talk
Yeah.
about this. Now, if you need consent from your parents, that immediately says to me, you know, is this inappropriate for your child to be learning? And actually, I know both my mum and Alex's mum both remember having to watch these videos that we would be viewing in this class before it was allowed for our eyes to see, which does make you question and worry that if the parents are shocked by what we were learning back then, because I remember my sex ed classes, they weren't heavy, they weren't anything horrendous, they didn't push anything on us. It was literally just the basics. That's what you need to know. Didn't do it again after that. That was it.
But Birdie, the thing about the sex ed is that when it's presented by a school, they have to present it in a value-free context. So when they're telling you to use protection, like a bunch of 12, 13, 14-year-olds, how can you tell teenagers about protection without the assumption that they are, or at least some of them are, having sex?
This is the next point of what is leading, what is making Mary Whitehouse. This is if we just get past the next point, then this is relevant to this. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, not watch it. You don't need to watch anymore. I'll just sort of add it, I guess.
Okay, well, I wanted to watch more.
Notice the time. Well, you can if you want. I was just looking at the time, but I'm happy to go over if everyone else is.
We can go over an hour tonight. By the way, anyone who's watching, wondering how Amy's going to fit this in, probably not over 2 hours, but over an hour would be fine.
I was thinking if anyone on if the chat want it, and if Poe and Birdie want to participate, doing follow-up streams on other areas of her career on my own channel, so it's not just taking up all of Women's Hour, but we can still go over it. Yeah.
I think at this rate, Amy, you think you might have to. So we're conscious of the time. It is 27 minutes in.
Okay. We've got more clips, so we'll see more from Mary Whitehouse later, and I guess we can leave links in the description. Although I don't think I can do that right now. I guess are they on YouTube? Did you find them on YouTube? Or?
Yeah, there's more from this bitch as well. God, I can't.
She's incredulous.
She deserves to be strung up from a lamppost, honestly.
I like her fashion, though. To be honest, she dresses like my mum.
I think go back to Mary. Mary's outfit in this is perfect.
It's really quite.
Look at those glasses. That is a fantastic outfit. She was always dressed immaculately.
She does look a lot smarter than the actual interviewer, which
and the interviewer was smoking a cigarette. If you've noticed.
I didn't notice that. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Mary's outfit, but we're not here to discuss the fashion of Mary Whitehouse.
We're going off track.
Okay, so that's enough from that one. Should I get another image up or move from the stream? Okay.
I can't remember what the next picture is, if I'm honest.
This one?
I think what's the one after that? That's her and her class year. She was a teacher of art, by the way. It was head of art at her school.
These university students, are they, or?
No, that's her. That's the
teachers.
When teachers all have photos taken
Okay.
you do the class photos. That's her staff at her school. She worked at.
I can't find her. Is that her?
No, she's the one in the middle.
Right in the middle. This one?
Right.
Oh, her. Yeah, there she is. Okay. This one?
Yeah. So this is. We'll leave it here. But this the first public speaking involvement that she had that really drew attention was in 1963 at a meeting of moral rearmament in Westminster, and it was. The controversy was started when Dr. Peter Henderson, who was the chief medical officer at the Education Ministry, announced that it was not unchaste to have premarital sex. Mary wanted to do sex education as recommended by the Newsom Report, in which you advocate for chastity before marriage and fidelity within it. And Dr. Henderson and his boss, Edward Boyle, refused to commit to this statement. They said that it's... he says that he's against imposing conformity where there are genuine differences in view. And in a letter to Mary, he wrote, whether or not one agrees with Dr. Henderson's views, I'm sure it would be wrong of me as a minister to appear to lay down the law authoritatively on a difficult moral issue with regards to which equally good and honest men both inside and outside of the Christian church, genuinely differ. He then goes on to quote the passage of On Liberty, in which he's saying that everything needs to be taken to its moral conclusion before it can be considered, like its extreme conclusion before it can be considered right. And then he says, I don't believe we serve the interests best by trying to conceal from them that there are some moral issues on which intelligent and sincere men are not all agreed, so that they must make up their own minds and, as one modern writer has put it, carry the cross of being a human being for themselves, which I think is quite like that. It's weren't like all societies ever like just for it within their own community, sex within at least marriage, or with even if it's with more than one person, more than one wife, it's still within marriage. Like, when is anyone? Where is this like controversy? Where does this genuine difference come from? And I think that relates to like what you were saying about if you were introducing the potential of, if you are telling people that they can use contraception, then you're essentially if they're like telling 13-year-olds that they can use contraception, then you mean they're not like, maybe some are just like blowing it up and having a laugh, but if they're using it for what it's intended for, you're giving them permission to have sex.
You're normalizing it at the very least, even if you do tell them that it's up to them and wait until you're ready and all of those things, that the caveats that they put with all of that, it's still, there's an implication there. There's very much an assumption that, if we didn't do this, then you'd be having sex. That this is a lesson that you need just by teaching them that. That's
See, in my mind, if you're giving, let's say, a 13-year-old protection, that is an indication, as you said, it's okay to do it. Now, in my mind, that's illegal because you're under the age of consent anyway. Regardless if it's with two 13-year-olds, that's still, in my mind, wrong. It should not happen, and you shouldn't have that idea put in their head. Now, in terms of the education side of it, I do think they should be aware of what it is, but they should be more educated on, the safety sides of it, to which there are many that people do tend to disregard. Instead of, saying, oh, if you do, then you should use contraception, etc., and not sort of put the idea into their head that, oh, you can, but do it this way. That's not the idea I'd want put into my child's head.
Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff after the AIDS crisis, that was used as a justification for saying, this is like a life-threatening disease that if you don't teach people how to mitigate it, that they will just be passing it around. And
even the Catholic Church said that.
Yeah, well, that's what they had that debate for a while. That was like a very atheism plus kind of argument that happened, like 2013, when atheism was still like a big thing to debate about on the internet, where the Catholic Church didn't want to give condoms to Africans because it was, it goes against their religion to do that, to use contraception in that way. But that contraception was not just for preventing pregnancy, it was also for preventing the spread of diseases. So that was a very checkmate Catholics, like, what are your stupid opinions worth anyway, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do it. Go on.
Sorry. I was just going to say, what this guy did was he then said that by pointing out what he'd said, Mary Whitehouse was encouraging people to harass him and his wife. But then, and I think this made her feel quite bad, but then someone pointed out to her that, if he just said that you shouldn't have sex outside, if he just said, like, school shouldn't be teaching children it's okay to have sex outside of marriage, then that would have that would have gotten rid of any controversy. Yeah. So this picture is from this event, and something that happened at school based on TV led to her forming a group called Clean Up TV, And they had like a big event at Birmingham Town Hall in which like thousands of people went to, like nanas were busting. There was like a public speaking, and there was like this huge petition that was like addressed to Parliament afterwards. But it was to do with the idea of sex outside of marriage again. And there was a TV, like those debate panel TV shows about sex outside of marriage called Meeting Point. And it was supposedly a religious program, and it contained a bishop's wife, a clergyman, a headmistress, and a psychologist. And not even the bishop's wife and the clergyman would commit to saying you can't have sex outside of marriage. And that she went into school the next day, and some of her students were really excited about this show, how interesting they found it, and that they'd come away from it convinced that they should not have sex outside of being engaged. And she said this about it in one of her biographies, that the incident made a tremendous impression on me. These were average girls. If within one short program their whole approach to the question of premarital sex had been moved to a sub-Christian dimension, was it not logical to assume that the program had the same effect on impressionable teenagers all over the country? And so she set up Clean Up TV, which led to this event, with a woman called Nora Buckland, in order to petition the BBC specifically, in order to take more responsibility for what it was showing children. And I think at this point they thought that the BBC was not doing it intentionally. I don't know.
The thing I wanted to say about the BBC and about the her TV appearances, if you've been following The Academic Agent in the last year or maybe even more, then you'll be familiar with his discussions around professional wrestling and the playing the heel kind of metaphors he's been talking about. And I think it's fair to say that Mary Whitehouse was often brought on to these kinds of panel shows, onto TV, not to sincerely humor her, to actually hear what she had to say, but so that she could be lambasted and sneered at by the panel, by the presenter, so that you could have these women sitting opposite her and sort of just, looking absolutely incredulous about Mary Whitehouse's outrageous opinions. Because when people see that, it doesn't matter if what she's saying is sensible or not. They are going to modulate their own behavior, the viewers are, based on what reactions she is getting. So if Mary Whitehouse starts saying this stuff and people are just acting completely shocked and laughing at her and thinking she's a crackpot, then now the viewer knows that is not an acceptable opinion to have or to speak outwardly. And so they've kind of been trained to be kind of cagey about sharing those pretty, I imagine, widely held opinions. There are probably more people agreed with her than at the time they were making it seem.
Well, I've got an extract from their manifesto of what they thought was what they said brought out the worst side of a person's character that was in TV. And this list includes sexy innuendos, suggestive clothing and behavior, cruelty, sadism, and unnecessary violence, no regret for wrongdoing, blasphemy and the presentation of religion in a poor light, excessive drinking and foul language, undermining respect for law and order, and unduly harrowing and depressing themes. Now, I think that list is pretty reasonable by today's standards of what can be considered corrupting, I guess, or at least not bringing out the best in people.
Yeah, it's pretty tame though, isn't it? It's not like hardcore pornography or depressing, harrowing themes. It's like that's watching things that are very critically acclaimed often have very dark themes or upsetting plot lines. I think that a lot of Sorry, Birdie, you were trying to say something. I didn't mean to crowd you out there.
No, not at all. I feel like what we've been saying in terms of making people look worse than they actually are on telly, or making a subject seem worse than it actually is, etc., etc. That still goes on now.
Yeah.
But a lot of so if you've got a broadcasting station, for instance, I won't dob any in, but I'm sure we can think of a few, that will broadcast something, but they will get away with depressing themes or, a subject on that list. But if they're sharing a news story from, for example, from Mary Whitehouse, they will then put that under one of the lists. They'll say, no, you can't say that on television, but the people who are broadcasting it actually can, and they get away with it constantly. So it is very much
a double standard.
A double standard, exactly that. Yeah.
I think whether we like it or not, the thing, people learn a lot from narratives, like, and when we see certain things, when ideas are put to people, especially impressionable people, this creates the idea that these things are considered not just acceptable, but adding, substance to life in a way that I think is really misleading. And it's quite I knew someone who worked in for a charity to do with children in situations of domestic abuse. And she said that one of the things that she found most striking was the way that the way these family dynamics resembled extremely closely to soap operas, the way that they're like soaps, essentially the way people reacted, in the way soaps are extremely dramatic and people will just like let all of their emotions out, and that in normal conversations that they can't resolve conflict leads to situations in which children are exposed to this, and it teaches them, and it also leads them to be put into positions of danger because there's a lot of aggression in the environment. And I think that it is extremely important to recognize that people do primarily learn from narratives, and that is why art and culture has been so censored for so long.
Okay.
I do think that has got a lot to do with the double standard as well, though, because on one hand, people don't know how to react, because you've got one side saying it's okay and another side saying it's not, but they're both on the same screen, for instance. But then, on the other hand, if you're watching something that is supposed to be wrong, in your head, you're kind of saying to yourself, well, actually, I can understand why they're doing that or why they're saying that, even though they might be swearing at their neighbor, but the telly will say it's wrong, or that somebody will say it's wrong, but then you're not getting the whole story.
I think it's because, these impact people who are from quite lower down the social strata and who aren't necessarily intelligent or introspective.
Something I wanted to ask Amy, without getting too much into that list there, I don't have it in my memory or anything, but how many of those could you tick off watching any given Shakespeare play, for instance? I mean, in its time, Shakespeare was not the entertainment for the high classes, or it may have been, but it was also just very lowbrow humor that would also be enjoyed by everyone, as we discussed on last week's stream.
The time in which Shakespeare was himself writing was considered at the time to be quite a decadent stage in society.
Okay. I mean, that doesn't. I still think that these days you get intellectuals and lots of people who consider Shakespeare's plays in today's context to be very, to be very meaningful pieces of work, to be very inspiring, to be entertaining, and they enjoy to see them actually performed the way they would have been, back in his day. And like I said about Game of Thrones earlier, like the inclusion of sexual innuendo, immoral behavior. I can't even remember the things, harrowing themes, depressing, these things are not just, pimples on a beautiful face. These are all part of Shakespeare's study of human nature and human behavior that actually add to the experience. So
I'm not saying that. I mean, this is what was on their manifesto. I'm not saying it's necessarily what I believe.
Sure,
but I do think that is a relevant point, and there is a clip of her discussing why she thinks the things she does. And I think, especially considering we're talking about, Shakespeare, people would go and watch, but this is literally broadcast into everyone's living rooms. This is accessible to almost everybody, and I think that mass culture, obviously, there's varying degrees of quality of culture, and there's varying degrees of who it's accessible to, and Shakespeare was accessible to just people in the street, but it was nowhere near as accessible as a TV was.
Yeah, in The Abolition of Britain, Peter Hitchens talks about how television is uniquely kind of passively observed by people. They just put it on and they'll just listen to it, or they'll just watch it while they're eating. They're not really actively engaging with it in the way that they do with a play or a book.
Yeah, going to the theatre is a social event.
We got $9.99 from the English Loyalist. Thank you very much. He's never heard of Mary Whitehouse, but he's glad that we brought her up. Like her and Enoch, they did have a prediction of what was going to happen in the future. Thank you for the stream, ladies, and have a good night. Yeah, well, I think we can't say that she was wrong.
She used to live 2 doors down from Enoch Powell for a period of time. Apparently she used to hear him swearing when he tried to get apples from his apple tree, which she was not impressed by.
Oh dear, Enoch.
And she focused specifically on the BBC because what she wants to do is to restore the BBC to its real position of respected leadership of the country. They're not against the BBC, but they're for the BBC, and that it wants it to go back to what it's done in the past, and it's a public service in a Christian country, and as such should lead the people on and up, not down and out. She was great at rhetorics, but yeah. And I think.
So we just have more super chats if you prepare the next bit, and I'll just read these. A topic suggestion. Go on.
I was going to say that it's a video clip.
Oh great! I'll get the next clip up. But how about you? I'll put it on the screen. You read it, Amy, and I'll get the clip ready.
Yeah. It's like teeny in this corner of my screen. What do you guys think of the law relating to child custody and the state-defined immunity for women?
A couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I think that's a topic that unless anyone beats that donation, we'll tackle that topic on another stream. But we really do have to press on with Mary Whitehouse at the moment. Thank you very much, Evil Ways, for £5. And we'll watch the clip. Is this
a couple of weeks ago on Open Night, there were children talking about television. Now, one of the subjects they were talking about was swearing on television. And one of the things they brought up was, what were your own feelings about the till death do us part kind of language? No, you weren't participating, but they were bringing it up.
Yeah.
And they asked the children if they thought that this was bad. And they said, no, they'd heard all this before. And they asked, have you heard more than this? More? What you would call dirty language outside the television screen, and the boys, 3 of them I think, said absolutely, of course we have.
Well,
now,
well, what does this prove?
It proves only that life is different.
Yes, but this is really what the whole of what one's concerned about. If you believe, as I certainly believe, and I believe that people who work in television believe it too, that television is the most powerful medium. In fact, the BBC says this, the most powerful medium ever to affect the thinking and behaviour of people.
And yet it does not say words that the children in ordinary families know.
But why are children today knowing words of this kind and having this level of of language. You see, now, can I make this point? Because I think it's tremendously important. It doesn't really matter what 4 letters make up one particular word. This isn't what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the level of our culture and of our communication. And one of the things that is now happening, which once again I think is so, well, this in a way is sick and rather frightening, is that instead of helping the young, and I was responsible for sex education, so I understand a little bit about this, to learn more mature ways of expressing sexual matters and sexual interest. What is happening now is that adults are putting a seal of respectability on the sort of 4-letter word syndrome, which adolescent boys have always written on lavatory walls. In other words, instead of helping the young to mature and develop in their communication, we're suddenly saying to them, oh no, we won't help you to grow up. We will go back and join you in your adolescent culture.
But what can be actually damaging, actually harmful to children about words?
Oh, goodness me, you say, what? I don't understand that question. Words are the means by which we express ourselves, by which to a great extent, our culture is judged. And you see, I think we have to help the young to grow through the sort of rebellious crudities of adolescence and find more subtle, more beautiful, more tender ways of expressing what they feel.
Yes, but is there any harm, any active harm
Yes, certainly.
in certain...
This interviewer is like, are words actually magic? Like, can you actually kill like Harry Potter style?
This is exactly the arguments that like Trigonometry and Spiked Online and all of those publications and Douglas Murray have today. Like,
Yeah.
this is a Guardian columnist in the 70s.
I think you're wrong. I think she's more like a kind of Cathy Newman level of discourse. Like she's a Cathy Newman of 1965. Sorry, Birdie, what did you want to say?
I was going to point blank say that I actually agree with Mary.
Yes.
Point blank, because it is about educating the young, the youth. You know, I mean, we see it all the time, day to day. You see teenagers going around swearing. You see primary school age children going around swearing. But it's about the education from perhaps their parents or the people around them and their teachers and, yes, television, to show them and allow them to grow up to be able to speak in, you know, the Queen's own English rather than speaking in, you know, I mean, we've all heard it. You go to a certain part of the country or a certain town and they're constantly swearing or they just can't speak. I mean, text talk, for instance, you know, technology has got a lot to answer for when it comes to just speaking in generally. We shorten words, we make
FML.
up words. Exactly, that have somehow made it into the dictionary. I mean, I'm not going to, you know, try and be, you know, bloody Saint Mary and say I don't swear and I don't use, you know, new words or anything like that, because we do, but there is still a limit. You know, there is still a line that shouldn't be crossed in terms of people who will use a swear word every other word. And I do know people like that, and I will just look at them and I will have no respect, and most of the time, and I have no idea what they're trying to say or what they're trying to get through, because they're not being an adult and they're not talking. They're just expressing themselves in an uneducated way, is how I see it.
I overheard a woman 2 days ago say to her young son, like, that if he did not start behaving himself in the shop that he was in, that she would wee herself publicly on the floor in order to embarrass him, in order to make him behave himself. And this guy, this like little kid, was like he was being like a little shit. But you know, that but they were going on at each other in this like extremely like just this where she was like literally on his level. She couldn't discipline him because she was on his level.
She wasn't being mature. It's like Mary Whitehouse just said, you know, instead of educating them to become mature, the adults are reverting back to being immature. So I think that's where we need to work out the direction we should be going in.
I don't know if we need to have a stream sometime just about swearing, but I have slowly been cutting out swearing from my life more and more. And then once my daughter started to learn to speak and was copying the words that we were using, I tried to cut it out completely in her presence, of course. Which is like once you get into the habit of it, it starts carrying over into other parts of your life. And then when I do swear, it's like I've got a secret little, like I'm saying a magic spell. Like I'm really like. Like it's really coming out when I start really swearing. But I do think it's particularly for women, unfortunately it is a double standard, and I think it's a warranted double standard that it is a bit vulgar for a lady to swear, and that doesn't mean that it should be completely cut out of the range of human expression for women. But I think there's a certain level of awareness that I think women have forgotten, that just to casually drop in a few F-bombs and S-bombs and everything else, I think it does come across a bit more vulgar. And I read like text messages and emails that I used to send like years ago, and I'm like blushing a little bit, thinking like, I can't believe I used to talk like that. I thought it was like cool to just speak in that slightly vulgar, like mannish way. Like I thought I was being like one of the guys, and I do kind of regret that aspect of my personality from back then. Should we? I think not much left of Mary talking here, I think.
I'm not sure there's much. Yeah.
Okay, let's have a. How do I get rid of that? Go away, Mary.
So, sorry.
I'm going back to the slideshow. Keep talking.
Right. So, this Clean Up TV campaign, it was really quite successful. I think like 2,000 people attended, and so they turned it into a proper organization called the National Viewers and Listeners Association, which was shortened to National Valor. And they were talking about tactics. So I've got quite a long quote, but I think it's quite important for what went wrong. Why Mary was so ultimately ineffectual. So she got advice from one person saying, don't, like, essentially you look, you and the woman, she was Mrs. Buckland, who was organizing with this, you look like just like Mrs. Smiths. I think I've got a photo of her and Mrs. Buckland together. That's the event. That's her and Mrs. Buckland.
Traffic on past.
And yeah, there. And they were kind of saying, you carry on in this, like, I think he called it inspired amateurism, because they just look like two Mrs. Smiths and they look very endearing. But she had advice from another person who was saying, like, right from the beginning, right from 1964, that that's a petition, that's all the signatures she had. But it was saying right from the beginning that, like, you're going to fail. The BBC and the Conservative MPs don't care about what you're doing, and you're going to fail. And this is a quote from a letter he sent her. That you will, of course, feel from time to time that occasional changes in television and radio program fare are due to efforts of our association. Indeed, some of them might be. But for a total change of pattern, please, and the raising of voices, as that have been proven over the past 30 years to my knowledge, will have no effect. Conservative MPs will have little influence on the present government, and being entertained by the former at the House can mean little or nothing. As for the invitation to meet Lord Hill in June, I assure you this is so much eyewash, and you will find that you will be received most sympathetically and given assurances by Charles Hill that he has the moral welfare of the country at heart, and that you can rest assured that all your desires and those of the members of your association will be carefully noted. Then life will go on as usual. I think that you are the one person who has a real opportunity to bring about a happy change of a sad state of affairs in television and radio, but you will be defeated at every angle by plausibility from those holding the reins, and this I know would be a great, indeed terrific disappointment to you. And that was written in 1964. He was talking about how the corruption of the BBC and Conservative politicians from the 1930s onwards. I think that's like really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that him or?
Yeah, this man, who I hope is also strung up off a lamppost in hell for all eternity with that cow.
I like those glasses. Why are those glasses
not as good as Mary's. Not as good as Mary's. I love some like cat horn rimmed glasses, like cat eye glasses.
And what's this? Did I go too far?
That's a clip to do with, I guess, the separation of children from parents as a result of TV. But Hugh Green was appointed Director General of the BBC in 1959, and they wanted to keep the BBC non-commercial, but they wanted it to, in this report that they conducted called the Pilkington Report in 1962, be in matters of liberalising the BBC should be one step ahead. However, and that he wanted to reflect changes in society. But in private, he said, I can't find the source for this, but I'm going to choose to believe it anyway. He said, we're going to use this organisation to change the way the rest of the country thinks. We want them to see the stuff they don't like. We don't really care if they complain. And,
sorry, Amy, I didn't mean to. I just saw a message from Birdie saying that she'd like to slip out at 10 o'clock. We do usually finish the stream at 10 o'clock, but should we say goodnight to Birdie and we'll maybe continue a bit longer?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Birdie.
I'm happy to carry on. I will catch up on listening tomorrow. But yes, I did travel back earlier today with the lovely, if anyone was listening to the radio in England, there was a couple of crashes on the M5, so a 3-hour journey took 6 again. And I'll be up early again playing with steam engines. Naturally, that seems to be what I've been doing most weekends.
Well, thanks for coming on after such a arduous journey.
Well, thank you.
Well done, you.
I will see you in.
We'll see you next week in person at the event.
See you next week. Myself and Alex will be at the event. I will post on, excuse me, on my Twitter again the next Roby Trust event that's coming up in September. It's a couple of weeks after the YouTube event, so it's all happening. But if there are people going to the event this weekend coming, then I will see you there.
I think we'll be doing a live show. If we can get a good signal, then Amy, Birdie, Cows, and I will be in probably my hotel room broadcasting Women's Hour all in person live, and probably a little bit too drunk and cackling like a bunch, cackling like a coven.
Cackling like a coven, absolutely, as we should. Well, thank you for having me, ladies, and I will see you very soon. And have a good rest of the stream.
See you next week.
I'll see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Amy.
It's okay.
Where were we?
Yeah. So just some background on Hugh Green. He was actually Graham Greene. He was Graham Greene's brother. But so between 1934 and 1939, he reported from Germany for the Daily Telegraph. And during the war, he reported from Axis-occupied territories, and he reported from, I'm not going to say the word on YouTube just in case, I don't know, it does something to the algorithm, but from, let's say, a Polish resort, let's say, after its liberation. And so he called the moral rearmament real nasty people, real Nazi types, which is quite interesting because they were quite active in creating social aid in after the Second World War. But he really was a key figure, I think, in the formation of the boomer mythology, I'd say.
Interesting.
Sorry.
No, I was just thinking about this boomer truth regime. I was watching AA stream deconstructing boomer truth from last week. I was just watching that today, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. This idea that any attempt to uphold moral standards at some point got associated with the mid-century Germans, and then the opposite, which is individual freedom and expression, became after the fact, that became our identity as the allies, America and England and Europe. We're all about free expression and being permissive, when it was the Germans who were these the idea of even having moral standards is became evil, right?
Yeah, and I think that this photograph is a clip from the TV show, but if you don't want to watch it from time perspective, I get it. But this is Hugh Green's description of this TV show. So this is a TV show called. Sorry, I just need to put the whole music on. I need to plug my laptop in.
I'll read the super chats. So, thank you from DRT is King for $10.01. Why don't you get Aidan Paladin on to talk women's psychology and how the internet in general and Instagram in particular has made y'all miserable? Y'all being us women, I think. She's a great YouTuber.
I think we need to veto people who put in an extra pence in order to beat the previous super chat. This needs to be struck down. Where's your prison guard hat, Poe?
I've got it up here actually. Where is it? It's not a prison guard hat. It's a navy hat. It's upstairs.
The navy hat.
She's a great YouTuber and lives in the Isle of Man. Yeah, I've got in touch with Aidan Paladin in an attempt to try and talk to her because I wanted to have her on Women's Hour. She wasn't very responsive to my DMs, so I think maybe she's just too busy or she's got something against me. Maybe if you're a fan of hers, you can go and pester her in live streams, but please don't harass her about it. Just a gentle prodding might encourage her that we're not nasty people and we do just want to talk. I'm very interested in psychology as a subject and I love her videos. Her more recent videos are good. Some of her old videos are a bit snarky. That's just like personality. Now I feel like I'm really like digging myself a grave. Like I like Aidan Paladin. I want her on the show. Like I love her videos. Really long videos that you can just put on and do housework to and learn like a lot about psychology and about the actual rigorous studies that goes into into these findings that she's reviewing. So brilliant channel, and I'd love to have her on the show. We've got another one from Nathan Hood, who we'll also be seeing next week, I believe.
Yeah.
Question for next week: where do we go from here? Logos or Praxis? Absolutely, we'll be discussing that on Women's Hour next week. Thank you very much, Nathan, for £12. That's the £12 definitely beats $10, and that definitely beats £5. So. Yeah, Logos versus Praxis.
$10.01.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
So this is a TV show called Till Death Do Us Part, and it's about it's about this man called Alf, and that's his wife and his daughter, and that's his son-in-law, and it's quite a dark show, really. It really went a bit far, but it's about this is Hugh Green's explanation of it, essentially. Alf Garner, he's working class, skilled at his trade, 3 generations behind the times, and well endowed with most natural human failings. He's also a Tory and a monarchist. It hardly needs to be said, therefore, that Harold Wilson and the Labour Party are utterly wrong as far as he is concerned. The same goes for the General de Gaulle, the Russians, the Chinese, ... But what wounds Alf's permanently hurt pride most is that his young son-in-law, Mike, young, good-looking, virile, strictly of the new generation, which rejects the lovely traditional shibboleths in which Britain has wallowed since Queen Victoria, he tears down every belief that the older man depends on. And what I mean, even the name of this show is literally like, I'm gonna wait until you die, and then I'm gonna take your daughter and corrupt her. Like that is exactly what they wanted to do to this country. I don't know. I've got a clip from it, which is pretty. It starts off where they actually talk about Mary Whitehouse, and then it gets like pretty dark pretty quickly. In the portrayal of Alf, it really is quite. It goes from being comedy to being quite like, I don't know. It kind of left me feeling a bit like, ooh.
Okay, let's watch it. I can't not watch it after you giving that kind of review.
That is. I think it's more obscene than some of the plays you want to turn off.
Yeah, he didn't want to turn the Andy Warhol play off, though, did he?
No. Sat up till 10:30 to see that.
I did not sit up to watch that.
You did.
I did not.
You did.
I did not sit up to watch that. I sat up to complain about it. That's what I sat up for.
Wasn't worth sitting up for, was it? I mean, all you saw was one tit.
You.
Well, I mean, it's the truth, isn't it? Eh? I mean, it's all that Mary Whitehouse fault, you know. It was her. She got us all at it. Yeah. I mean, trying to raise our hopes and all you saw was dosh, losh, losh. A load of rubbish that was, wasn't it?
I was surprised.
Look,
So was Gran. She was disappointed too. Well, it's a bit late for her to sit up.
Wasn't there enough sex in it for her?
Well, she likes them Mary Whitehouse things usually.
what are you bloody talking about, Mary Whitehouse things? She don't have nothing to do with them. She bans them, she does, or tries to.
Get off, advertisers are more like it. I mean, no one would have sat up to watch that Andy Warhol play if it hadn't been for her. Hey, listen, I wouldn't have gone to see Last Tango in Paris if it hadn't been for her, Lord Longford.
It was a good film, though, wasn't
No,
it?
but-
Like Marlon Brando.
Yeah, but look, a lot of people wouldn't have gone to see it if it hadn't been for her, no Longford, though, would they?
No, Gran wouldn't have. She'd never have gone all the way up the West End if it hadn't have been for them. But she likes what they pick.
Lord Longford and Mary Whitehouse, tipsters of porn. Hey, out to see the genuine article? I mean, she's the punter's guide to porn, she is. Everything she picks, bound to be a cert winner. Hey, I wonder if they cop for it, like.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised, mate. Where's my bloody pipe, Paul? I mean, your Longford, he's one of your socialists, isn't it? It's your
Yeah.
darling Harold made him a bloody lord, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know, and he's doing a good job too, I know. Well, he's sorting out the good porn from the bad porn, isn't he?
Eh?
Him and Mary.
You great, hairy, filthy scarskin. Get out of it.
Is this actor this bald actor? Is he playing someone who's like 10 years older than the actual actor is? It's just a bit distracting me. Like he's just he's like a guy the same age as his son-in-law who's just like wearing a moustache to look old.
Standing on another young boy's shoulders in a long coat or something.
I don't know. That's just what I'm thinking of. Trying to break up the clip so that
I'm
YouTube
gonna
can-
break it up just to point something out in
Go
a
on then.
second. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me when.
Oh, I will.
Oh, it stopped. I pressed play, but it's not a. Having some trouble with StreamYard tonight.
Listen, that woman, that Mary Whitehouse, is concerned for the moral fibres and the well-being of its beloved country. Well, never mind about it's being rotted away by your corrupt films and your telly and your bloody BBC's the worst of the lot, with the top of the pops and the evil painted youths dressed up like girls and that middle-aged peroxide albino clunk click ponce they got in charge of it.
So that who he
Yeah, you bloody...
Sorry.
that who he is referring to is Jimmy Savile. So that that aged well. Yeah.
Yeah, nice one. I want to put that back now. Now I know you're talking
Clunk
about.
click ponce they got in charge.
Yeah, the
It's
peroxide
being
blonde.
rotted away by your corrupt films and your telly and your bloody BBC's the worst of the lot, with the top of the pops and the evil painted youths dressed up like girls and that middle-aged peroxide albino clunk click ponce they got in charge of it.
Yeah. Yeah, nice one.
Yeah. But like after this is like the point where it just turns to like just a bit sinister as far as I'm like I think.
I talked on Twitter
You
about.
don't need to watch it if you don't want to.
No, I will. It's just that I wanted to talk about Top of the Pops a little bit because
Yeah.
at the time, not at the time of that, but I was talking on Twitter a while ago about how I just really can't understand. Like I literally can't empathize with the people who thought that the Beatles were like way too scruffy to be role models. You know, like because their hair was long. You know, that these, like, by today's standards, they're so, like, I can't even force myself to see these young men as scruffy. They just look like, you know, polite young men who you'd have round to see your gran, you know?
It's
There's
a slippery slope,
I
not a fallacy.
sure, but I really, for those people, it was so obvious, like, I just can't see with their eyes. You know, sometimes I feel like I can empathize, and then sometimes I'm just like, what were you seeing that I can't see?
I mean, the hair was very like, it was long, but it was like groomed and shiny. I guess.
Yeah, it was it wasn't
Well
dirty.
positioned.
They didn't have tattoos. You know, they weren't dressed like women. You know, they looked quite they looked quite proper by today's standards. Anyway, I think that's how a lot of people see moral standards of the past. Like you just can't put yourself in their position because it's so. Once it's gone, it's just gone.
Yeah,
it takes like hundreds of years to build that back up again.
It's the same with like not just like moral standards, but the way they just like can you imagine perceiving, like for some people, it's just impossible to not understand that progress is not like cannot not see history in the way of like of moral and technical progress. Like some people just cannot conceive of that. I guess.
Yeah, the things that happened more recently are good in
Yeah.
terms of standards. But then things like industrialization and capitalism, those are all bad. You know, the things that people still believe in the noble savage, even if they paradoxically
Yeah.
believe this sort of progress good mindset. It's all very, when you really dissect it, the boomer mindset is actually quite paradoxical and complicated in some ways. Should we watch the end?
Yeah, if you'd like, but I kind
Let's
of
do it.
think it's at this point it kind of tips from comedy to just I don't even know what it's just. Barry Whitehouse actually called it aversion therapy, towards the values this man believes in.
Well, it's coming down the pipe. I've clicked play. It's coming down the pipe slowly to us. It's going to start on its own time, I guess.
I guess we'll have to put Alf on hold.
So the Alf is the name of this young
The old
sprightly.
man.
Oh, Alf is the older guy. Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard. I don't know if they made this explicitly into an American TV show, but there was definitely an American TV show that was a lot like this.
Kind of what all sitcoms are like.
Yeah,
It's the general like family dynamic of almost all sitcoms.
And the thing that really, the thing I heard a critic say about it was someone who was praising the American version of this kind of dynamic is that for it to be really funny, the truth is that both sides have to get one over on the other side. It's only funny if the old guy can give it as good as he takes it. So this young sprout is always, he's always disparaging his old father-in-law. But he started.
Yeah, you bloody would, wouldn't you? See, and their seductive music, they're singing about men's things and driving a youth of the country to crime and mugging and
Really?
where's my bloody pipe gone? And bestialities of rape and living like bloody gypsies and refusing to go to work and bloody living off the dole and having no respect, mocking their elders and betters and calling me bloody skinny. I'll tell you something, if ever there was a time in the history of this bloody country when we needed a war, mate, it's now. A war to get rid of most of them. Yes, a bloody war, mate. It's the only thing that can save this country now is a war, a bloody big one.
You're mad.
No,
You're
you're
mad.
mad.
Yeah, you're mad.
In the last two
Bloody
wars,
mad, I'm telling you.
last two wars we had, we lost some good youth.
Oh,
We
yeah,
did.
sure we
Youth
did, yeah.
with a promise.
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
Decent, law-abiding, respectable youth. Youth what done what was told and respected their elders and betters. But if we had a war now, all we'd lose would be rubbish. Long-haired, lazy, good-for-nothing bloody rubbish.
Yes, yeah, bloody, these two are too smart for you, mate. They won't fight none of your stupid wars no
too
more.
bloody
That's for
scared,
sure.
more
Too
like.
scared. Yeah.
You were scared in the last one.
Shut up, you! Shut up, all of you! I want to watch the bloody telly!
Yeah,
Quite
it
mean-spirited.
It just turns like it escalates quickly, doesn't it? It just stops being comedy. It turns into something else.
Yeah, this Alf guy. I've never seen this TV show, but that mindset is very Dune. Like the idea that the
he's
war.
portrayed as being very violent, like borderline domestic abuse.
Yeah. It's like it's not a very pleasant household to be in, is it? It's not comfy like Friends. I want to watch my lovely Friends when all these young people always agreeing with each other. I do have this sort of I do kind of sympathize with his worldview that this idea that when you send your young men off to be trained as soldiers, although there are certainly very gruesome and horrible circumstances that come out of that, there is something about being being trained to fight along with a bunch of other young men in very what do you call it, deprived situation. I don't mean deprived like poor. I mean
deprived of comfort and ease.
Yes, exactly. To, you know, just men being men out on their own, you know, doing like really up against it, using every ounce of strength and endurance that they have, and really learning that self-discipline that they just don't get from. You can't really get that anywhere else. You know, you can impose self-discipline on yourself by going to the gym or learning karate or something, but that discipline, when it's actually in service of something, I think does something to a generation of men. And that's not to say that it counterbalances all of the horrors of war that, you know, leaves those same men sometimes a lot weaker than they otherwise would have been, you know, physically or psychologically. But there are, you know, I think the people who do come out of it all right and get to go home and make their families, they do have a kind of moral fiber that we in a post-war society. I know we are at war, but yeah, it's a bit different. We kind of lack that immediacy or that sort of disregard for life and for for what it really truly means to survive, to defend what you believe in, all of that.
Yeah, but I think I mean, Mary Whitehouse herself pointed out that said that this sort of was a result of, what did she say? Got it. Nevertheless, it has to be said that we get the television as well as the government we deserve. Certainly for ourselves, we realise that we abdicated our wider responsibilities in the tired years after the war. Young enough to want fun, we'd miss out. Young enough to want the fun we'd missed. Part of an affluent society, coming to terms with so much, we failed to grasp what was slipping unnoticed through our comfortable fingers, our children and our nation's future. Yeah.
Yeah, sums it up, doesn't it, really?
Yeah. And
go.
I've got like very little left, so don't worry.
Perfect.
Nearly done. So in 1970, Edward Heath was elected Prime Minister. He was a Conservative, and there was like changes in the sort of head of the BBC. There was Charles Curran was made Director General of the BBC in 1969. So prior, I think that was under I can't remember his name, the guy before, and then Michael Swan was made chairman of the governors of the BBC in 1973, and they were initially quite nice to Mary Whitehouse. They humoured her, I guess. They invited her into the BBC. For private meetings, as well as gave her more opportunity in airtime, and they invited her to like the first anniversary of Swan's inauguration, in which he said that the BBC went in the wrong direction under Hugh Green. But then after like about 5 years in power, they just cut it off. They just wrote a letter to her saying, Swan just wrote a letter to her saying, don't contact me anymore. And that kind of ended this sort of what the man previously warned her about, was that they might humour you for a bit, but this is not going to lead to any substantive change. Like, don't get your hopes up. And it's right, I guess.
Yeah, I guess from an elite theory point of view, they just the BBC. I don't even know what you would even call it without getting too heavy for YouTube, but the just the force of progress, the regime pushing towards, or you could just, to use a more populist language, you'd say the people hunger for salacious TV. They want to see swearing and violence, and if there's an appetite for it, and there's a attention to be had, now that we have this new technology of TV, I do kind of think that it was inevitable in a sense, even with the politicians being on Mary Whitehouse's side or, humouring her, like I said. I do kind of think it was inevitable. Is it time for another poll? I can get that ready if you have more to to add?
I think adding to the elite theory thing is I haven't like brought it up because obviously we're running out of time, but there's quite an interesting interaction from the 60s when Tony Benn was Postmaster General. You know, Tony Benn is like described by even right-wing people as like what an example of like what left-wing politicians should be like what an honest man and honest politician should be like. And he said in Parliament, he said to a Conservative MP that was criticising his the fact that he was like, the BBC makes its own decisions, we're not going to democratise it, and he was pushed on this point as to why not, and he just said, on the honourable gentleman's suggestion to censor individual programmes if he thought that they were offensive to taste or biased politically, if I were to exercise my judgment in censoring a programme which I thought were politically biased or offensive, one of the first people I think who would object would be the honourable gentleman himself, for our views do not coincide. And I think that this has like, you know, like when Schmitt's decisionism, this to me doesn't quite it's not quite it's like, you know, like when free speech like advocates, they always say I don't want to censor because if someone else is in my position and I censor, they can censor me. Whereas he's kind of saying the power's in my hands. I don't need to censor because it's doing what I want anyway. And he seems to, the last sentence seems to suggest that if it wasn't doing what he wanted, he would be open to censoring, right? He would be open to censoring this man's opinions, and that he doesn't need to. And it kind of reminds me of like the He Who Makes a Decision from reading when we reviewed The Populist Delusion.
Yeah, well, I think you'll remember this week Sam Harris had a clip that went viral from his appearance on Trigonometry, where he was saying that it was right to censor. I don't even know if the story is still censored on YouTube. I think it's okay to talk about now that the Hunter Biden's laptop leaks that were heavily censored on Twitter. You couldn't post a link on Twitter to Hunter Biden's laptop story. That URL was just blocked. It's not even that. Anyway, I don't want to go into that, but that's exactly what Sam Harris was saying. Was like, well, listen, if it stopped Trump winning, Trump has been involved in so much scandal and corruption that it's only it's only a tiny speck. Any corruption involved in the Biden family is just a speck compared to Trump's corruption. So it really didn't matter if that had to be suppressed in order to stop Trump from winning.
Yeah, I don't. What is Trump University? Because you kept talking about Trump University. I've got no idea what that is.
It's just a sleazy university run by Trump that gave out sleazy degrees, as far as I can tell. It was like, you know, basically, in my opinion, no less legitimate than any other American university these days. So I don't see the big deal. But Sam Harris thinks it's an absolute abomination.
It's just as bad as, you know,
Hunter Biden's.
It's just as bad as essentially prostituting and child trafficking. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah.
And then I think I've got some like points that I found about like Mary Whitehouse, opinions on her career, which I just thought would be like, there's just 3 and I thought they'd be interesting to discuss.
Last chance to vote in the poll, guys. Go to the live chat and vote in the final poll. If you voted the first time, go back and vote again. Or if you didn't vote the first time, that's fine too. Just go ahead and vote. Take it away, Amy.
So there was a screenwriter for the BBC called Dennis Potter, who Mary Whitehouse was extremely critical of the majority of his plays. But in an interview, he said he wouldn't join the chorus of abuse about Mary Whitehouse because I think that at least she acknowledged the central moral importance, to use the grandest word, of art, and that self-censorship, far from being the worst, is the best form of censorship. Which I think is like quite an people talk about Mary Whitehouse as just being a nag that didn't get it. But here's someone who has been called the like Shakespeare of TV, saying, oh, this is a woman who, unlike all of the people who don't take culture seriously, truly understands its importance.
Yeah. I think she does have a higher opinion of entertainment than the people who make entertainment, I think.
Yeah.
It is quite sad when people are people are just making stuff for the sake of, making people laugh. There is value in that. But I hope we aspire to do better on Women's Hour at the very least, trying to inspire something in our viewers as well as entertaining.
Yeah.
If that's not taking on too many pretensions.
I thought and as well, a lot of the information I got is from a book called Ban This Filth by Ben Thompson. And he said in the introduction that from Doctor Who to Dennis Potter and the Beatles to the Rolling Stones, the list of Mary Whitehouse's targets looked to many nostalgic readers like a roll of honor. If she had got her way, our artistic heritage would have been immeasurably impoverished. And I kind of trying to understand this idea of, we have this idea that it's okay that we got the culture, we got the Beatles, right? We've got the Rolling Stones, we got all of this great culture, but compare that to what Dennis Potter said. How we assume that we got the best because we had freedom, but we don't. That's not necessarily. That's just taken for granted. That's not necessarily the case.
We're analysing it from a biased position of the current time. I mean, I do happen to agree that like I said about Game of Thrones and about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
This book was written in the current times. It was published in 2012.
I just think it's talking about freedom. You're talking to modern people about liberation and freedom of expression. It's like because we live in a society that values that above all else. Every time it's just synonymous with positivity. It's impossible to even imagine these things in anything but a unalloyed positive light. I think so. It is that boomer mindset again that comes back and just, it is the opinion and it is the mechanism that forms the opinion all in one. Yeah, if that makes sense. It's the ultimate bias.
I guess in a sense, the sort of Marxist theory of history was almost set up to do that. Was set up to create that mindset, and we have all, to some extent, internalized that mindset, that view of history.
Yeah, I've heard it called the Whig view of history. To go back even further than Marx, it's called Whig history, I think. There's sort of just the idea of... I think the Whigs go back further than Marx, right? Am I getting that wrong?
Yes, yeah.
Cool, all right.
Yeah, I think he referred to it as material dialectics or something.
So our original poll, I've lost it now. Originally we had, was Mary Whitehouse right? Yes. For 72%, so that's almost 3/4 of people said yes initially, and then we had no at 6% and a bit for 20%. 116 people voted. Thank you very much. Later on, it's still ongoing. Shall I end it? How's it going now?
Sorry, I wasn't listening when you said the results of the poll. Can you say?
3/4 said yes. 3 in 4 of our listeners are positive about it, which really surprised me. I thought that I thought people would be won over by the Britishers' campaign against Mary Whitehouse and the BBC and everyone else who ever wanted to sneer at her. But it seems that people have seen where our slack standards to our slipping standards with regards to entertainment has led us, and we don't since we don't like where it's led. It's determined that she was right. So that's 3/4 said yes. Weirdly, the number of yes has gone down. So in the final analysis after the stream, you've managed to convince 1% fewer of people to. It's now gone down to 71%, down from 72. And a bit has gone up to 27, while no has gone down by 4%. So there's fewer people saying no, there's more people saying a bit, and slightly fewer saying yes, which is really not what I expected. It's all, surprises from everyone. So thanks everyone for voting.
What have your opinions changed?
I think it was very interesting to hear about her life and what she was doing, and she definitely did articulate it well. But in the analysis of the things that she was actually opposed to, I still can't force myself to think of those things as morally corrupt, even though the things that have come after that, in the slippery slope kind of sense, the things that will pay, what was this called, till death do us part? This seems like relative, it's a bit mean-spirited, but pretty much harmless, but it paved the way for some much more depraved entertainment, which admittedly I do also enjoy. So I don't know if I feel like I would be a hypocrite to say that Mary Whitehouse was right, because I do enjoy so many extremely broad and unwholesome entertainment. But I think she's very much right about sex education, and there's really a place for preserving the innocence of childhood for maybe not like as long as possible, but there's a realm of childhood that should be preserved to the extent that we still can, not exposing children to things like to adult forms of entertainment and swearing and violence, and even just things that are like unnecessarily bleak, teaching them about historical events that are really extremely harrowing, that they're not really psychologically prepared to learn about, I think. That's a completely different question. I don't know what Mary Whitehouse would have said about the way that they teach history these days to 11-year-olds in a very moralizing sense, but again, that's completely going off topic now, I think.
Well, the guy who wrote this book said, like there's the sort of saying, like, you can't see the forest for the trees, and he said that Mary Whitehouse couldn't see the trees for the forest. Like, she knew that there was something going wrong, and she explicitly pointed out that this is intentional top-down behavior in order to destroy the moral fabric of the country and to destroy its culture. But she would like focus on things like Ding-a-Ling by like Chuck Berry or something.
Yeah, that's a pretty good analysis. Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's exactly right. She knew she was looking too forward into the future. So that things that she was trying to warn us about things that were not yet a cause for alarm, but would soon become cause for alarm. She knew she was too good of a predictor of the way things were going, I think. Mm-hmm. Is it a Cassandra? Exactly. It's a good way to think about it. I'm sure I was about to say something else. Yeah, I think going back to the issue of children, I'm just going off on my own thing now, but I think the really important thing about childhood innocence is not that they are completely ignorant of all things, but children, like on the playground and with their siblings, spending time with children who are not only older and younger than them, they evolve their own kind of culture where children will swear in front of each other, but they know not to swear in front of adults, in front of their parents and their teachers and the clergy. They know that there's a place for swearing and that they're not supposed to do it. So that when they're alone in their little clubhouse or on the playground, they can get a little bit of joy, a little bit of excitement from swearing to each other, and they know all the swear words. I don't think that it's right to keep children in complete innocence, but that they're allowed to explore these things just with each other, not with adults.
She said that in the interview with that woman, how like children, there's a point in childhood in which you need to rebel, and that if they can't rebel in that sort of way in which you described, like they rebel in more extreme ways.
Yeah, that could be the case. Yeah. So I think she definitely had a much more nuanced outlook on all these matters than I perhaps gave her credit for before the stream. So thanks so much for doing the all the analysis for us, and I hope that the viewer who sent us that request kindly was satisfied, and I'm sure you'll answer his questions if he wants to reach out. We'll try to if he wants to know more of our opinions, etc.
We really should have remembered his name.
Yeah, I should have. I would recognize it if I saw it. I'm just looking through the comments now to see if it jogs a memory. But if there's more to talk about, then we certainly can return to the topic either in a few weeks' time on Women's Hour, once we've covered some of the other subjects that we want to get to, and of course meeting in person, we're going to probably have something special to talk about then. As well as Logos versus Praxis, which was our £12 super chat.
I think I prefer your plans for the events topic.
I can't remember what that was, but I think I had a few.
We
silly
can't.
ideas.
We have to keep it secret until we're there.
Very, very secret. What happens at the event stays at the event to some extent. Yeah, so we may come back to that either on Women's Hour, or we can do it on your channel or on my channel. We'll have to figure something out if you do want to talk more about the subject.
Yeah, I think going over her tactics, her legal actions, and I think because there was like the 80s and the 90s as well, and that includes a lot of stuff to do with like pornography and homosexuality, which I think I didn't I mean, we just couldn't cover everything, but there's still like 2 more decades of Mary to go.
Well, you know, our live stream that we're talking on now is called the Mary Whitehouse Experience, which is named after a TV show from the 90s that was not like the TV show wasn't explicitly mocking her, but they named their TV show after her as a kind of middle finger in the face of censorship. And, you know, this is an outrageous show. You're really going to be don't put this on when your mum's in the room. This is really edgy stuff. And the sketches that my husband's a bit older than me, and he remembers all that stuff from the 90s when I was still just a tyke and couldn't stay up late enough to watch the Mary Whitehouse Experience. I
remember Alex explained who David Baddiel was to me when my mum brought it up, and I was like, who's that? And then like me and my mum, it was like the first time he met my parents. He was just trying to explain to me who like David Baddiel was.
Yeah, a little bit awkward.
Oh god.
Okay. I think that's enough for tonight. Thanks everyone. Stay tuned for next week when we'll be in person. I think there are still tickets to the event if you really want to meet Amy and Birdie and myself, and Cows will be there as well. Of course, there'll be a bunch of blokes there as well, but who cares about meeting them? And there's some kind of mold bug man who's going to be there. Like who cares? Amy's going to be there.
Elves, the dark elves.
Yeah, it's a meeting of the dark elves. And a few hobbits I expect will be thrown in.
Me.
Thank you so much for joining me, Amy, and for everyone for watching. Have a good night, and we love you.